On today's Tech Help for Churches, using Apple's new PodcastS Connect. Hi, and welcome again to another episode of Tech Help for Churches. This is the show where every week I help you with church new media, social media, and just using the internet in general for your church. My name is Paul Allen Clifford. So, like it or hate it, the 800-pound gorilla in the podcasting space is iTunes. Now, that made a lot of sense back when the 800-pound gorilla in the portable media space was the iPod. But most people don't connect to iTunes all the time anymore. In fact, most people kind of try and avoid it. And most people use things like this. This is an iPad. This is a portable device, an iPhone, also a portable device. Even more people use Android phones. So they're not actually using iTunes to get their podcasts. So what's a better way to do it? Well, Apple shipped a better way to do it. It's called PodcastS Connect. Now, I'm saying that very specifically and very carefully on purpose because it's going to be hard to hear. You're going to hear PodcastS Connect and go to podcastconnect.com and you're going to find exactly the wrong thing because you have to add an S in after the word podcast. So it's actually PodcastS Connect. I know, really annoying, but I might say it like that a couple of times. Just to make it clear, there is an S before the word connect. So PodcastS Connect.com, and that'll take you there. One thing that I did notice, now I don't know if this is the case across the board, but I just updated my version of Chrome to make sure that it wasn't my fault. But I find that when I go to it in Chrome, it spins and spins and never actually lets me connect to PodcastS Connect. But Safari does. So that's one thing. If you're on a Mac, try Safari if you have the exact same problem I have and you're using Chrome. Firefox, try that. I haven't tried Firefox, may or may not work. Definitely haven't tried Opera, haven't tried any of the other third-party browsers out there, but Safari did work, so that's what I'm going with. Also works on the iPad, also works on the iPhone. Again, haven't tried it on Chrome for Android, so it could be that it's something in the funky way that Apple's doing things that's causing this problem. So why would you want to go to PodcastS Connect? Well, first off, if you've got an Apple ID and if you've ever bought music from iTunes, if you've ever had an iPhone, you have an Apple ID. You can sign into PodcastS Connect with that, and it'll show you all the podcasts that you have submitted with your Apple ID. Here, let me actually not make that go away. There we go. So here is a list of all the ones that I've submitted. There's one on here that I submitted as a favor for someone that didn't have iTunes. There's one that I quite frankly don't even know what it was. And then there's a couple that I submitted and I quit doing almost immediately, so I got rid of those. So that's the first thing that you can do is you can either hide or delete podcasts. Now, if it's an old podcast you're never going to do again, by all means, delete it. So I did that with the one that I submitted for the other guy because he hadn't done it in years, so I wasn't worrying about it. The not found, don't know what it is, deleted that one. There are a couple, I used to do a show on Wednesdays called Eternity Changers, and I have hidden those so that people don't subscribe only to be disappointed when they run out of episodes. So I've done that, and that leaves most of the rest of my shows. So I've got trinitydigitalmedia.com, which is all my podcasts. I've got one for all my videos. I've got the Q&A audio show, the screencast video show, the Tech Help for Churches video show, and the Technobabble video show. And that points out a problem. I'm missing 3 of my shows here. So that gives me something to look at. What I was able to do was I was able to find out that 2 of them were actually still using FeedBurner, so I was able to get rid of that. We can talk about that in a future show. But that at least tells me that there's a problem. Now, this is the list of podcasts that I've submitted myself. One of my shows, this one actually, was originally created by someone else. So I'd expect that not to be on the list. That's fine. I'm going to work on getting that transferred over into my name. The next thing that I find interesting is my very first podcast, Technobabble, which has been around since 2005. It's not on here. Now the video version is, which I submitted much more recently, but that other one isn't. So I wonder what's going on there with that. They're both still in the library, so I need to do some work on that. So anyway, once you have the list of podcasts, you can click on any one of the podcasts, and let's talk about some of the options you have there. First off, it shows you the status. Is it an active podcast? If it's not, and you're still doing it, that's something to look into. Last refresh, it shows you when the last time the feed was refreshed. It gives you the URL of the feed, so that's very, very helpful. If you can't remember which feed you used, did you use your Libsyn feed? Did you use a feed from Blueberry PowerPress? You just can't remember? Well, it tells you right here. Now, there's another field that says mirror URL. As best as the podcast consultants that I listen to can figure out, that is a redirect for the RSS feed. So the idea is that if you change your RSS feed, but you hand out this mirror URL, the mirror URL will always point to the latest RSS feed. Now, you have a few options here. You can refresh the feed. Don't do this very often. Only if you've submitted a new show, it's been 24 hours or more, because they don't always refresh it as quickly as maybe you would like. Let's say it's been 24 hours, it hasn't refreshed, click the refresh feed button. The reason why is because if we overdo it, Apple might just take that away. There's been some discussion that someone saw somewhere where they said, don't use this button very often, or we might take it away. That just saves some time for Apple, because they were capable of refreshing the feed before, but now you can do that. Just don't abuse it. Secondly, view in iTunes Store. That just takes you to the iTunes Store. No problem there. Hide podcast hides the podcast, and delete podcast deletes the podcast. Now, one thing that I did want to say is under the URL for the feed URL, you might be tempted if you switch. Let's say you had it on a server and you thought, well, this is no good, and I'm going to switch it over. So you click in here, you click in that field, and then you could type away. Yeah, don't do that. Here's why. That does not affect your current subscribers. That only affects the listing in iTunes. Once people are subscribed, they're subscribed to your the feed that they're subscribed to, and iTunes is out of it. So that's kind of important. That's something that you really want to be careful about doing. Okay, there's one other option that I haven't talked about before, and that is in the tags in your RSS feed. I just quite frankly don't know where to put this one thing. It's possible to hide individual shows. Now, I'm mentioning this as part of this show just to say that I've mentioned it. The thing, though, is that I really don't know why a church would use this, because hiding an individual show doesn't hide it from your subscribers. It only hides it from the iTunes store. Why would you want to hide an individual show from the iTunes store? If you were using profanity in the title, yeah. Do you use a lot of profanity in your church podcast titles? Yeah, I don't either. So I don't think that it would necessarily be helpful to us, but if you have a friend that's doing a kind of vulgar podcast and they're worried that they're going to be kicked out of the iTunes store, then by all means tell them about this feature where they can hide an individual episode from the iTunes store so they don't get kicked out. Just as a way of being nice to someone that maybe needs Jesus, maybe you mention that. But other than that, that's basically the overview of PodcastS Connect, the replacement for the submission tool in iTunes. Now, one other thing I nearly forgot to mention is, since this is web-based, since you can go to PodcastsConnect.com to log in, you no longer have to have a Mac. You no longer have to have a PC that you download iTunes onto. In fact, you could do this on Linux. You can do it on your mobile device. You can connect to PodcastsConnect.com. It redirects a couple of times. And then you log in and you can submit a podcast there. So that's another cool little feature of this new tool that Apple's given us. And I hope that that's helpful to you. I hope that this is some information that'll help you and your church as you're creating a podcast to help people. And if you like this content, head over to trinitydigitalmedia.com. Trinity, like the Holy Trinity, digital, like ones and zeros, media, like media.com, and check out some of the other great content that I've created for you there. And join my email newsletter while you're there. Check out the store, that kind of thing. Until next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford with trinitydigitalmedia.com. Go out and change eternity.